Have you ever been told, I love you, so many times, it almost started to feel like a warning? Like those words were less about affection and more about something tangled, something that made your skin crawl just a little? That's the fine line we're crossing tonight. Because what feels like love, intense, overwhelming, might actually be obsession wearing a mask. And trust me, they're not the same thing, not even close. It's kind of strange how we often confuse these two, right? We hear stories all the time about people falling in love so hard, so fast, that it seems like fate itself decided to mess with them. But then things start to unravel. Texts come nonstop, calls at odd hours, jealousy over nothing real. And suddenly, you're stuck wondering, is this really love, or is it something else, darker? This question brings us face to face with something Carl Jung hinted at in his work, but never spelled out in everyday terms. The way our inner patterns, the unconscious parts of ourselves, can project onto others and create illusions that feel like love, but are actually about possession. When someone is obsessed, they don't see you as a whole person with flaws and freedom. They see an image they've built to fill their own emptiness. Before we get ahead of ourselves, let me tell you about Clara. She's a graphic designer living in Chicago, juggling deadlines and trying to stay sane during those brutal winters. A few months ago, she met Mark through mutual friends at a small art gallery downtown. At first, everything seemed normal. Fun conversations over coffee at that tiny place on Randolph Street where the barista remembers your name after one visit and your complicated order. But Clara noticed something off pretty soon. Mark would text her within minutes after they said goodbye. Not just hey or good night, but long messages packed with questions she hadn't answered yet or declarations that felt intense for someone who barely knew her. One evening, Clara shared how she felt suffocated. Mark replied with promises of change, but kept doing the same thing the next day. What Clara didn't realize was that Mark wasn't just eager or infatuated. He was slipping into obsession without recognizing it himself. And here's where many of us stumble. Obsession often wears the disguise of passion. So how do you tell when someone crosses from affection into obsession? The first sign, and probably the most fundamental, is when their interest stops being about you and starts being about control over you. They want to know where you are all the time, not because they're worried you're unsafe, but because they can't bear not having access. Think of it like this. Imagine a birdcage painted beautifully and lined with velvet inside. It looks inviting at first glance. But step closer, and you realize the bird inside isn't free. Its wings are clipped. That's what control masquerading as love looks like. Someone trapped by another's need for possession. Now, don't panic if this sounds familiar, either for yourself or someone close to you. Acknowledging this is already a huge step toward clarity. Here's a practical way to explore this dynamic in your life or relationships around you. Take note of moments when communication feels less like sharing and more like surveillance. For 1 week, jot down every time someone asks where you are or what you're doing, not once, but repeatedly within short periods, and how that made you feel. Did it trigger anxiety? Did it make you want to pull away? Or did it feel reassuring? These feelings matter because they point directly to whether boundaries are being respected or ignored. In Jungian psychology terms, what happens here is related to projection, the unconscious assigning of one's own fears or needs onto another person, and identification, a blurring of personal identity boundaries fueled by emotional dependency. Mark's story could have taken a different turn if he'd recognized his tendency early on instead of confusing neediness for love. Clara might have seen sooner that Mark's constant messages weren't just enthusiasm. They were attempts to fill his own emptiness by trying to live through her moments. If you're nodding along or feeling uneasy, it might be worth trying a simple exercise I've seen help people shift awareness here. Next time someone crosses into controlling behaviors disguised as affection, like relentless messaging, pause before replying immediately. Take 3 deep breaths, yes, cliché but effective, and ask yourself quietly, is this coming from genuine care for me or from fear I'll disappear? You might be surprised how often fear drives what looks like love on the surface. Interestingly, this distinction matters beyond romantic relationships too. Friends, family members, even coworkers can slip into obsessive patterns when their identity gets too tied up in how much influence they have over us. And here's something curious I recently noticed while scrolling through social media trends from early 2024. There's this viral meme about ghosting, but turning into hovering. People disappearing only to reappear obsessively checking up later under different usernames or accounts. It feels spooky, but also highlights how obsession tries every trick in the book when faced with distance. So yes, that feeling of being overwhelmed by someone else's love, it might actually be obsession wanting control dressed up as connection. Now, if that resonates with you, or if you've ever been caught in such swirling emotions, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, because untangling these threads together can be incredibly freeing. By the way, if you find this conversation helpful so far and want more insights on navigating complex emotional landscapes influenced by deep psychological patterns without turning into therapy jargon, feel free to subscribe to the channel. We keep things real here. Before moving forward, though, let me offer a quick grounding practice connected directly with what we've just unpacked. Tonight, before sleeping, or whenever feels calm, try writing down one situation involving another person where your freedom felt limited instead of honored. Describe exactly what happened without judgment, as if telling a story rather than making accusations. And then ask yourself gently, how did I respond? Was I honest with myself? Often, we hide our discomfort behind politeness or denial because admitting feelings of suffocation seems too vulnerable. But naming these moments breaks their spell and opens space for healthier boundaries next day. If Clara had done this back then, maybe she would have spotted earlier not just Mark's behavior, but also her own hesitation in setting limits. A hesitation many experience because society teaches us, women especially, should be accommodating above all else. And yes, that's deeply rooted in collective psychological patterns Jung explored. Anyway, this first sign, the shift from caring interest into controlling obsession, is crucial because it shows how easily love can become entangled with personal shadows we rarely want to face openly. But knowing this helps us separate what nourishes us emotionally from what drains us, and that difference changes everything going forward. Keep this thought as we dive deeper next time into other subtle signs that reveal when fascination turns toxic, because it really isn't enough just to say love is complicated. Sometimes it's downright dangerous if mistaken for obsession masquerading behind sweet words and promises no one asked for. So tell me now, have you ever experienced someone crossing from love into obsession without realizing it themselves? Maybe even caught yourself doing that unintentionally. Share below. I'm curious how these patterns show up differently in each story. And while we're on stories, I promise next part will get even more revealing as we explore how obsession manipulates reality itself. But let's leave some mystery for later. For now, remember, true connection respects freedom first. See you soon. It's funny how we sometimes mistake intensity for sincerity. Like the louder or more frequent someone proclaims their feelings, the deeper they must be, right? But what if the volume is just a way to drown out their own doubts? That's exactly where our second sign lies, when emotional extremes replace steady affection. Let me tell you about Diego, a 29-year-old software developer from Austin. He met Sophia at a weekend hiking event in February, right before those unexpected spring storms rolled through Texas. They hit it off quickly, sharing playlists and jokes about the unpredictable weather. At first, everything was light and easy, but soon Diego noticed something that felt like a roller coaster instead of a walk in the park. One day, Sophia would be all warmth and tenderness. The next, she'd flip to sudden anger or despair over tiny misunderstandings, a missed text, a delayed reply. The shifts were so sharp, it left Diego dizzy. One minute, I felt like her whole world. The next, like I was walking on eggshells. He tried to ask what was going on, but her explanation was always wrapped in, "I just care so much," or "It's because I'm scared of losing you." Here's where it gets interesting and tricky. Emotional instability like this often masks deep fears of abandonment and rejection, a fear that paradoxically fuels obsession. Instead of a calm river of mutual trust and understanding, it becomes a stormy sea tossed by unmet needs and desperate attempts to hold on. From a psychological perspective, this pattern can be linked to what Jung discussed as the shadow side of our emotional selves, the parts we don't want to acknowledge but that influence behavior profoundly. When someone can't regulate their feelings or reactions steadily toward another person, it shows an internal conflict spilling outward. So why does this matter? Because love grounded in obsession doesn't grow. It fluctuates wildly based on how secure or insecure the obsessed person feels at any moment. You might notice this too. Relationships where mood swings dictate interactions rather than respectful conversations. It's exhausting because you're constantly trying to fix or soothe someone else's inner turmoil instead of building healthy closeness. If you're wondering how to spot this without getting lost in drama, here's a simple way to check. Over 3 days, pay attention to moments when emotions suddenly spike, either yours or theirs, without clear cause. Ask yourself, did the mood change feel proportional? Or was it like watching a weather app stuck on storm alert no matter what? Noticing these spikes helps identify when reactions are less about present reality and more about underlying fears playing out. Now for something practical that might seem counterintuitive but works. When you detect these emotional waves coming up, try naming them out loud, softly but clearly. For example, "I see this is really upsetting you right now," or even simply saying, "Whoa, that felt intense." You're not trying to solve anything immediately, but acknowledging emotion gives space for awareness instead of reactive chaos. Diego found this small shift helpful when Sophia's mood flipped unexpectedly during calls. They started pausing together instead of spiraling into arguments. And here's a little twist. I'm sure some might think acknowledging emotional extremes openly makes things worse. But quite the opposite. Putting feelings into words helps separate person from emotion instead of being swallowed whole by them. It reminds me how recently there's been an uptick in meditation apps encouraging users not just to calm down, but observe emotions with curiosity, a practice rooted deeply in accepting ourselves beyond fleeting feelings. All right, moving along naturally from emotional instability comes our third subtle sign, one that sneaks under radar precisely because it feels flattering at first glance: relentless idealization followed by sudden devaluation. Think about Lucy, a 26-year-old pastry chef from Brooklyn who recently started dating Tom after meeting at an indie film screening last fall. Tom couldn't stop complimenting her, the way she made croissants, her laugh, even the way she tilted her head when thinking deeply. At first, Lucy felt adored in that movie star kind of way every actor dreams about and every human secretly craves. But soon enough, Tom's admiration morphed into criticism disguised as concern, or worse, complete silence after minor disagreements. One evening, after Lucy forgot their coffee date, thanks to an overtime shift, Tom sent her multiple texts calling her unreliable and selfish within minutes. The kind of messages Lucy never expected from someone who once called her an angel. This roller coaster between pedestal and pitfall is another hallmark of obsession masquerading as love. Jung explored something similar with archetypes connected to projection, how we assign exaggerated qualities onto others based on our internal needs rather than their true selves. When someone idolizes you relentlessly, only to tear you down later without warning or apparent reason, it reveals their struggle with integrating different parts of your personality into one balanced view. The danger here? You begin doubting your worth because your value feels tied only to how others fluctuate in their appreciation, not who you truly are beneath those judgments. To step back from this trap requires recognizing idealization as another form of control, trying to keep someone perfect and predictable so that insecurity doesn't overwhelm. Here's an exercise inspired by this insight. Next time you catch yourself or someone else swinging between extremes, either glowing praise or harsh blame, pause and write down those feelings separately without mixing them up as facts about the person involved. For instance, what did I admire genuinely? What seemed exaggerated? When did my perception shift suddenly? Was my response based on actual behavior or my own fears acting out? By externalizing these thoughts on paper or digital notes, you create distance between perception shaped by obsession and reality grounded in acceptance. Lucy began doing this after each argument with Tom. It helped her see that his mood swings weren't reflections of her worth, but symptoms of his inner conflicts projected outwardly onto her relationship with him. What if I told you many people unconsciously seek relationships like these because they mirror unresolved tensions inside themselves, like they're trying to fix something broken within by finding someone outside? It reminds me slightly of recent discussions around attachment styles emerging into mainstream conversation during 2023 mental health talks online. But attachment theory often misses how much our unconscious projections shape these patterns beyond early childhood scripts alone. Anyway, recognizing idealization followed by devaluation helps break cycles where obsession disguises itself as passion by alternating extremes instead of stable care. And no, that doesn't mean throwing away compliments or honest criticism. It means learning when those become tools for control rather than genuine connection. By now, maybe you're noticing a theme here. Obsession hinges less on real affection and more on unmet needs seeking expression through others. But each sign shows up differently, depending on personal history and context. That's why knowing these patterns is empowering. It helps us choose freedom over fixation, step by step. So tell me honestly, have you ever noticed someone flipping from adoration one moment into coldness the next without clear reasons? How did that make you feel? This subtle dance between highs and lows deserves attention, because ignoring it risks deeper entanglement in toxic cycles masquerading as love. And before we dive deeper next time, there's one last thing worth mentioning about obsession's grip: its ability to distort reality itself, not just emotions, but facts too. But let's save that for later, since unpacking distortion takes time. For now, try observing today any moments when emotions suddenly spike or perception swings dramatically, and see if naming these shifts out loud makes a difference. If you're curious about exploring these ideas more practically with tools designed not just for reflection but actual change, there's also a guide I've put together. It gently walks through recognizing obsessive patterns and setting healthier boundaries without guilt or confusion. Just saying, sometimes we need more than introspection. We need simple frameworks supporting growth. Anyway, hope hearing Diego's and Lucy's stories alongside simple exercises brings clarity and maybe even relief to anyone caught in similar loops. I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation soon because peeling back layers around love versus obsession reveals more surprises than most expect. And hey, keep sharing your experiences below if something resonated. You never know whose story might intersect with yours next. Until then, take care and remember, steady affection honors freedom. Obsession demands possession, and recognizing which is which changes everything quietly but profoundly. There's a certain sneaky shape obsession takes that we haven't touched on yet, the blurring of boundaries, not just emotional or physical, but in how someone respects your autonomy as an individual separate from their desires. This is our final sign tonight, and it's surprisingly subtle until you find yourself caught in it. Take Jenna, a 32-year-old marketing consultant living in Seattle. She met Aaron at a tech conference during fall 2023, the kind of place buzzing with caffeine-fueled innovation and endless networking. At first, Aaron seemed attentive and thoughtful. He'd remember small details about Jenna's favorite book genres or her weekend plans. But over time, Jenna noticed something unsettling. Aaron began inserting himself into every aspect of her daily routine without asking, showing up unannounced at her office, deciding what she should eat for lunch, commenting on who she should spend time with. It wasn't overt control, like locking doors or tracking GPS. No, it was a slow drip of eroding boundaries masked as care and concern. Each act seemed innocent alone, but piled up into a heavy weight Jenna felt pressing down on her independence. This phenomenon goes beyond jealousy or insecurity. It's about a lack of recognition for the other person as a fully separate self with their own needs and space. Psychologically speaking, it reflects what Jung might describe as failing to honor the otherness in relationships, the distinctness that allows connection without drowning or domination. Jenna struggled to articulate this feeling at first because societal scripts often frame intense attention as romantic devotion rather than boundary violation. It's easier to accept someone being involved than to say they're crossing lines. Here's where many fall into confusion. Obsession disguises itself not just in actions, but in intentions claimed. I only want what's best for you. I'm just looking out for you. Yet under this umbrella lies an invisible fence trapping freedom. If you're wondering how to spot such boundary blurring early, try this. Think of your interactions with someone important over the last week and list moments where they acted on your behalf without asking permission or made decisions affecting you as if you were part of their internal world rather than your own person. How did those moments make you feel? Respected, smothered, or somewhere in between? Now comes a small but powerful exercise. The next time you notice your boundaries being nudged without consent, pause and calmly express your experience. Something like, I appreciate your concern, but I'd prefer to make this choice myself. If saying it aloud feels hard at first, write it down privately. Sometimes putting words on paper builds confidence before speaking them. Jenna started doing this gradually. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes she felt guilty or worried about hurting Aaron's feelings. But each time she asserted her space gently yet firmly, she reclaimed pieces of herself lost under the weight of uninvited involvement. What stuck with me is how boundary-respecting love doesn't need to be loud or dramatic. It shows up quietly through mutual respect for differences, even when those differences challenge comfort zones. Obsessive attachment wants to erase these lines because uncertainty feels threatening. But real love understands that space between people is not emptiness, it's room for growth and trust. Now, let me take a breath, figuratively, because weaving all these threads together isn't simple, and that's precisely why this conversation matters so much. We started by recognizing control disguised as care, then navigated through emotional storms marked by extremes rather than steadiness. We explored idealization turning into sudden devaluation, a dangerous flip-flop fueled by unmet inner needs, and finally landed on boundary erosion hidden behind seemingly innocent gestures. At first glance, these signs might seem isolated, bits of behavior here and there, but look closer. They connect like puzzle pieces, revealing obsession's true form. A desperate attempt not to lose someone by trying to own them instead of truly loving them. And this distinction is everything, because love that clings tightly doesn't nourish, it suffocates. Love rooted in fear demands constant reassurance. Love grounded in respect lets us breathe even when apart. Sometimes I think about how modern culture encourages hyperconnectivity, constant messaging apps buzzing with notifications, social media feeds pulling us into everyone else's lives nonstop, and wonder if these external pressures amplify our tendencies toward obsession disguised as love. It's no coincidence that people today struggle more than ever distinguishing genuine affection from control when the very tools designed to connect us often blur boundaries faster than we can notice. So what does freedom look like then? Not absence of emotion or distance, but presence, being fully engaged while honoring each other's individuality. It means holding hands without gripping too tightly, sharing laughs without losing sight of personal paths, caring deeply without needing possession. This shift isn't easy because it asks us to face parts inside ourselves we'd rather ignore, the fears driving obsession and the shadows hiding behind declarations of love. Yet acknowledging these shadows opens doors to healing, not by rejecting connection, but by redefining what true connection requires. Trust in ourselves and others as whole beings capable of coexistence without control. Remember, Clara texting Mark back was one story among many, but these patterns echo silently beneath countless relationships worldwide today during times marked by social upheaval and rapid change since early 2023. Diego weathering Sophia's emotional storms showed us that love isn't always calm seas, and understanding emotions honestly helps more than suppressing them ever could. Lucy, navigating Tom's swings between pedestal and pitfall, reminds us how easily projections distort reality until balanced perspective returns through conscious effort. And now, Jenna standing firm against blurred boundaries illustrates courage needed to reclaim autonomy amidst overwhelming affection masked as devotion. If any part of this resonates deeply or sparks uncomfortable recognition, I encourage you gently. Keep observing yourself and others, not just through lenses shaped by desire, but through awareness grounded in respect for whole selves beyond neediness or fantasy. We're not here to judge anyone caught in obsessive patterns. They often arise from loneliness, trauma, cultural conditioning. But we are here to choose differently, to choose freedom within connection, to choose love that doesn't demand possession but invites participation. That choice may feel small at times, a word spoken softly setting limits here, a moment noticing emotional tides there, but those moments build bridges out of chaos toward clarity. And clarity leads us away from painful illusions toward relationships where we thrive instead of merely survive. In closing, imagine carrying this thought with you. Love is not about merging so completely that two identities vanish into one indistinguishable mass. Love is about two flames burning side by side, bright enough individually so neither consumes nor extinguishes the other. It's messy sometimes, imperfect always, but real nonetheless. That messiness holds beauty because it means choosing presence over perfection every single day. And if this message lingers even slightly beyond now, it already serves its purpose better than any tidy resolution could. So I'll leave you with this question, lingering softly. What would happen if tomorrow you loved yourself enough to honor your own boundaries fiercely and then invite others to do the same? That question unfolds endlessly into new possibilities waiting quietly beneath fear and confusion. And maybe, just maybe, that is where true love begins. Not in obsession disguised as devotion, but in freedom embraced together. Thanks for sticking with me through this exploration. If anything here stirred something inside you, I'd really like knowing how it landed. Feel free to share below whenever you're ready. Until next time, take care kindly, with curiosity toward yourself above all else.